At Ciudad Juarez prison in Mexico, known as one of the toughest in Latin America, the concrete walls are old and worn. Inside, inmates move cautiously through their daily routines. Tension builds as two rival groups secretly prepare smuggled weapons. Their leaders exchange sharp looks, both expecting violence to erupt. Calancho, leader of the North Bloc, sits cleaning an old pistol while watching the South Bloc, controlled by his rivals. The feud has lasted for years, but today he believes blood will stain the prison halls. And it all begins inside prison cell 211. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the city, Juan Oliver, a 40-year-old human rights lawyer, prepares for the day. He has handled many cases of abuse inside Mexican prisons, and today he plans a surprise inspection at Ciudad Juarez. At home, his wife Helena, 7 months pregnant, grows uneasy and pleads with him not to go. Juan insists on his duty, reminding her that reports of abuse must be investigated. He kisses her forehead and leaves. Elsewhere, L25, the head of Mexico's largest cartel, meets Yaris, the anxious warden of Ciudad Juarez. L25 demands the release of Balder before the government transfers him. Yaris agrees, but warns that Balder must not be moved through the city to avoid suspicion. Balder, a 25-year-old accountant, is one of the cartel's most valuable figures in money laundering. Arrested 3 months earlier, he has been kept in a special cell with privileges other inmates never receive, enjoying better food and unlimited visits. That comfort is about to end, since the federal government has already signed his extradition order to transfer him to a higher security prison. On the same day, Juan Oliver arrived at the gates of Ciudad Juarez prison with unease. The old building, lined with barbed wire, towered over him as he handed his identification to the guards and requested a visit with a client named Flavor Gonzalez. The guards checked his documents and refused entry, explaining that visits to the South Block were suspended. Juan raised his voice and threatened to report them to the court commission. Reluctantly, the guard stepped aside and let him through. Inside his office, Warden Yaris was on the phone with Calancho, who demanded that everything be ready within 20 minutes because L25 was waiting. After ending the call, Calancho performed a ritual before his men. He slit the throat of a white chicken and smeared its blood on his face, convinced this would give him strength and protection for the battle ahead. Meanwhile, Juan entered the prison and was stunned by the conditions. A facility designed for 500 inmates now held more than 2,000. Hallways had become makeshift cells, and prisoners lay on damp, filthy floors. Control of the prison was split. Calancho ruled the North Block, while Mastro's group dominated the South. Their rivalry was so fierce that the prison had installed barricades to prevent direct clashes. Visiting rules reflected the tension. Families were only allowed in alternating 2-hour shifts, and even guards were barred from entering certain areas considered too dangerous. Eventually, Juan met Flavor Gonzalez, who posed as his client. Flavor complained about being kept in a hallway unfit for prisoners and urged Juan to push for his transfer to a better cell. At the same time, Calancho's men announced it was time. Calancho gave the signal, and guards aligned with him moved into place. He then led his men in a brutal assault against Mastro's faction, killing prisoners without hesitation. The prison alarm erupted. Visitors tied to Mastro's group panicked and tried to flee as inmates grew more violent. Within moments, the entire facility collapsed into chaos. Amid the turmoil, guards moved Balder out of his cell as planned. The violence had been orchestrated by Yaris and Calancho to secure his release, but during the transfer Calancho's men suddenly turned on the guards and opened fire. Calancho pulled Balder into an underground cell for protection, even though this was never part of the plan. His men then massacred visitors linked to Mastro's faction along with several guards. Juan Oliver hid near the prison kitchen, desperately looking for an escape route. Outside, Yaris entered through the back gate to meet the head of security, Ramirez. Yaris demanded an update. Ramirez explained that Balder had disappeared from the cameras, most likely taken by Calancho during the fighting. He reassured Yaris that the operation was still under control. Moments later, L25 called Yaris, furious that Balder had not been delivered. He warned that Balder was too important to lose and threatened Yaris with punishment if anything happened to him. Shaken, Yaris tried to calm him, insisting the plan was still on track. Inside, Calancho revealed his true intentions. Instead of protecting Balder, He presented him to his men and declared that they had suffered nearly 20 years of inhumane conditions while Balder lived in comfort. He told them it was time to fight for their rights. To mark his betrayal, a flag with the word cambiamos, meaning a change of plan, was raised. It signaled to Yaris and the guards that their deal was broken. Yaris was left stunned. Kalancho dragged Balder to cell 211, the most feared block in the prison. It was freezing, filthy, and notorious as the harshest place of punishment. Meanwhile, Juan tried to slip out through the back doors, but every exit was locked. His fear grew when he heard approaching footsteps. One of Kalancho's men carried a flamethrower, hunting down survivors among the visitors. Juan quickly stripped a dead body of its prisoner's uniform and disguised himself as a new inmate. Soon after, a bald prisoner confronted him, questioned his identity, and forced him to choose between joining the North Block or siding with Mastro's group. Juan refused to pick a side, insisting he was a new prisoner who knew nothing about the feud. The bald inmate warned him that survival depended on joining the North Block. Elsewhere in the prison, Yaris grew frustrated as events slipped further from the original plan. He ordered Ramirez to evacuate the visitors taken hostage by Kalancho's men, but the security team was quickly blocked by the defenses Kalancho had already prepared. Seeing no other option, Yaris went to the underground cell to confront Kalancho directly. He warned that this betrayal would endanger not only Kalancho but also his family, since Balder's organization would never forgive him. Kalancho stood firm. He declared he was ready for the consequences and demanded better treatment for prisoners. Balder, he said, would remain a hostage until their demands were heard. After the confrontation, Kalancho called his wife and told her to hide, knowing she would be targeted. He also gave strict orders to his men not to harm the hostages, saying they were to be used only to pressure the authorities. For now, the hostages were locked in a cell. Yaris grew increasingly anxious. His position and his life were now at risk. He ordered Ramirez to end the riot before both the government and L-25's cartel intervened. During this tense moment, an unknown caller reached Yaris and requested a meeting at 4 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, Kalancho went to cell 211 to confront Balder. He told him he was nothing more than a disposable pawn and that his organization would replace him without hesitation. Balder had two choices: die in prison or cooperate. Balder rejected the offer. He insisted that loyalty came first and remained confident the organization would rescue him and punish Kalancho for the betrayal. The riot spread further and soon attracted media coverage. Inside the prison, Carajo, Kalancho's most trusted man, grew suspicious of Juan Oliver. He forced Juan to lower his pants to check for tattoos that identified Mastro's members. Finding no markings, Carajo accepted Juan, and the others followed. They welcomed him into the group and took him to the room where Balder was being held to help gather supplies for the riot. Kalancho felt satisfied when he saw news channels reporting the chaos. He believed the government would soon be forced to listen. Juan then suggested they deliver their demands quickly by using the hostages as a message to the outside world. Kalancho agreed, but Carajo's resentment toward Juan deepened. He feared Juan was trying to take his place as Kalancho's right hand. To spread their message, Kalancho ordered the bald prisoner to record everything inside the prison and assigned Juan as the narrator to deliver their demands. Meanwhile, outside the prison, Helena was stunned to see a news broadcast showing her husband among the inmates. Yaris also knew Juan was not a prisoner but a human rights lawyer, yet he chose not to reveal the truth to the media, fearing it would place Juan in even greater danger. The riot grew worse, leaving Yaris trapped in a dilemma. News of the crisis reached the government, and Governor Montes held a press conference. She declared that the riot was part of a criminal plot to free Balder before his extradition. Montes insisted the government would not back down. The extradition would proceed, and a professional security team had already been deployed. Inside the prison, a guard held hostage confided in Juan about a communication device hidden in the workshop. It connected directly to the outside, offering him a possible escape. But reaching it required passing through Kalancho's ritual room, an area restricted to only a few men. Meanwhile, Ramirez grew impatient with Yaris's hesitation. He secretly met Ernesto, a prisoner who worked as his informant, and ordered him to locate Balder. If Ernesto failed, Ramirez warned he would send in armed forces to take Balder by force. A bald prisoner overheard the conversation and followed Ernesto, convinced he was betraying them. Ernesto, under pressure, then sought help from an older inmate, asking where Calancho had hidden Balder. Outside the walls, L25 also ran out of patience. Frustrated that Yaris had not delivered Balder, he suspected the government already knew their plan. To send a warning, he ordered his men to carry out bombings across the city. Inside, Calancho and his men were also losing patience. Their demands had gone unanswered, and Calancho considered killing the hostages to force action. One spoke out against the idea, warning that such violence would only push the government to respond with more brutality. Instead, one proposed using the American hostages as leverage to pressure the Mexican government. While the men argued over the suggestion, one slipped away toward the workshop, determined to reach the communication device. Carajo intercepted him and attacked. A fight broke out, and one killed him. The chaos inside the prison now spilled into the streets as L25's cartel bombings sent the city into panic. Helena, desperate to save her husband, forced herself to travel to the prison. Governor Montes remained unmoved by the growing violence. Citizens demanded she cancel Balder's extradition to stop the bloodshed, but she refused and ordered the process to continue. Back inside, Calancho returned to cell 211 and pressed Balder to reveal cartel secrets, warning that sooner or later his own bosses would kill him, whether the information leaked or not. Elsewhere in the prison, Juan Oliver quickly covered Carajo's body with a cloth so the others would not suspect him. His hands trembled as he wiped away the blood, realizing this was the first life he had ever taken. Not long after, Helena arrived at the prison and witnessed the scale of the riot. Hundreds of families crowded outside, desperate to save their loved ones trapped inside. Elsewhere, a general struggled to deploy enough forces to the streets because Governor Montes refused to release additional funding. She allowed only a limited number of police to confront the cartel attacks. Inside the prison, Calancho noticed Carajo was missing and sent men to search. They eventually found his body wrapped in cloth. At the same time, Ernesto made his way towards cell 211 to free Balder, but Calancho caught him nearby. Ernesto claimed he was looking for Carajo and had simply lost his way. Tension escalated as Mastro's group prepared for a large-scale assault on Calancho's block. Unaware of the imminent attack, Calancho gathered his men to honor Carajo's death. Carajo's killing fractured the group's unity. Suspicion spread quickly, and Ernesto accused Juan of being the murderer. Juan denied it, sparking heated conflict. To settle the dispute, Calancho ordered a death match. He handed knives to Juan and Ernesto, declaring that the loser would be branded the traitor. The fight was brutal. Juan, inexperienced in combat, was nearly killed several times but kept fighting. In the end, he cornered Ernesto and won, yet refused to finish him off. Despite his restraint, Calancho's rule was absolute. The loser was marked as the traitor. Before the matter could be resolved, Mastro's forces stormed the North Block, launching a violent assault. The corridors turned into battlefields filled with blades, metal clashes, screams, and alarms. Amid the chaos, one seized an opportunity to escape. He pulled 2 guard hostages with him and forced his way through the fighting. When confronted, he struck down attackers without hesitation but avoided unnecessary killing. He guided the guards through a quieter corridor. Outside, Helena stood before news cameras. Pregnant, she pleaded for the government to take action and save her husband still trapped inside. In the control room, Ramirez spotted Juan and the guards on CCTV heading toward the back exit. He rushed to intercept them, unlocked a gate, and blocked their path. Ramirez demanded that Juan bring Balder with him. Without Balder, no exit would be opened, and Juan's life meant nothing. At the same time, another guard received unusual orders to buy 50 kilograms of skewered meat to pacify the North Block prisoners and calm their rage. Beyond the prison walls, the city plunged deeper into violence as cartel attacks spread. Civilians were caught in the crossfire, and among those fleeing was Calancho's wife, hunted by L25's men. Inside the prison, Ramirez confided to Yaris that he had been using Juan to locate Balder. Juan's safety, he admitted, meant nothing compared to securing Balder for outside cooperation. Yet Ramirez also recognized the danger, knowing that if Calancho discovered Juan's true identity, Juan would be killed. Outside the prison, Lupe, a guard once saved by Juan, spotted Helena in the crowd. Seeing her pregnant, Lupe urged her to leave, but she refused. She insisted she would stay until her husband was safe. Lupe then went to the control room and demanded to know why Juan was being blocked from leaving. Ramirez answered coldly. Juan was being used to track Balder, and nothing else mattered. His tone ended any discussion. Inside, Juan slipped into Calancho's ritual room to treat the wounds from his duel with Ernesto. The cuts were deep and threatened infection. A prisoner skilled in surgery stitched him up and revealed critical information. Balder was being kept in cell 211, an underground block known for freezing temperatures and brutal conditions. After treatment, Juan entered the workshop, the only room with an outside line. He informed Ramirez that Balder was in cell 211. Ramirez, shocked, said he had never heard of such a place, but pressed Juan to confirm the location if he wanted a chance to escape. To get closer, Juan worked to earn Calancho's trust. He claimed to support the fight for better living conditions and placed himself inside the North Block circle. Calancho responded well, beginning to treat Juan as an ally. Soon after, Calancho contacted L25 for negotiations. The call was tense. L25 demanded Balder immediately and warned of serious consequences. Calancho ended the call visibly shaken. Meanwhile, Calancho's wife prepared to flee their home. When the doorbell rang, she never reappeared. Moments later, inside the prison, a man in glasses delivered a message. The package had arrived. At the next meal, the North Block froze in silence as prisoners opened it. Inside was the body of Calancho's wife, wrapped tightly. L25 had sent his warning. Enraged, Calancho seized a machete and ran to cell 211. He raised it to kill Balder. Juan followed, urging him to stop. Killing Balder would end their struggle, erase their cause, and invite the cartel's full retaliation. Calancho, consumed by anger, shoved the machete into Juan's hands and ordered him to prove his loyalty. Juan resisted, but pressure left him no choice. He swung the blade and severed Balder's hand. Blood sprayed across the cell. Panic spread as Balder collapsed. Prisoner doctors rushed him to the infirmary, but the bleeding would not stop. Realizing Balder's death would ruin their leverage, Calancho ordered professional medical staff to be allowed inside. Outside, Governor Montez deployed security forces to crush the crowd. The crackdown was violent, leaving many injured. Amid the chaos, Helena was caught in the clash. Her water broke, and she collapsed in critical condition. Inside the prison, Juan knew nothing of her fate. Shaken by the blood on his hands, he followed Balder to the infirmary. The prisoner medics admitted they could not save him without outside equipment. At the same time, Montez met DEA representatives in a church to discuss the crisis, the risks, and the pending extradition. Although the DEA criticized her hardline approach, they agreed to accelerate the process to secure Balder's data. An agent named Javi volunteered to infiltrate the prison disguised as medical staff and carry out the extraction. Meanwhile, L25 pressed Yaris again, warning that their agreement had collapsed and consequences would follow. Inside the prison, Balder's worsening condition forced the authorities to allow professional medical assistance. Seizing the moment, Ramirez and Yaris devised a parallel plan, arranging for guards to cut the power from the control room while the medical team made their move outside. When Juan and Calancho tried to move Balder, Juan caught sight of Helena in the crowd. Panic struck him, but Calancho pulled both Balder and Juan back inside. Helena's condition quickly deteriorated. The ambulance arrived too late. She died from complications after her water had broken hours earlier. Ramirez ordered the medical staff silenced so the truth would not reach the public. Juan later called Ramirez, demanding immediate treatment for Balder and asking about his wife. Ramirez lied, assuring him that Helena and the baby had survived. Meanwhile, Lupe informed Governor Montez of Balder's critical state and proposed using the medical transfer as a chance to seize him. Montez agreed and contacted Javi, instructing him to infiltrate as part of the medical team. She warned the mission was dangerous and against protocol but ordered Javi to deliver Balder directly to her, not the DEA. Yaris also prepared his own escape plan through the back entrance, while Ramirez quietly positioned guards. Juan recognized the pattern and exposed Ramirez in front of Calancho's men. Pressed for answers, Juan demanded the truth about Helena. Cornered, Ramirez admitted she had died. Enraged, Juan killed him, then withdrew to the ritual room, consumed by grief. Soon after, the medical team entered with Javi hidden among them. Yaris, under pressure from the cartel and losing control, began packing to flee, leaving a lieutenant in charge. Guards stood ready in the power room, waiting for the signal. Calancho allowed the team to treat Balder. As they worked, cartel members outside grew impatient and prepared for an assault. The National Guard observed but did nothing, signaling secret cooperation with the cartel. During treatment, the medical team distracted the guards with complex procedures. Once their focus broke, Javi contacted the power room. The lights went out, plunging the prison into darkness. In the chaos, the medical team rushed Balder out on a stretcher toward the arranged exit. Outside, L-25's men clashed with Calancho's group, buying time for the escape. Juan took a different path. He returned to cell 211 and recovered Balder's suitcase containing records of transactions, bribes, and ties between corrupt Mexican officials and American partners. In a narrow corridor, he handed the case to Javi, urging him to use the evidence to expose the truth. Juan stayed behind, determined to finish what he had started, unaware that Calancho was watching from a distance. Soon after, the escape plan unfolded. Javi escorted Balder out of the prison, but when Governor Montes ordered him to hand Balder over first, he refused, calling it illegal. Instead, Balder was taken to the docks, where U.S. intelligence agents were waiting to complete the extradition without her approval. Moments later, cartel gunmen stormed the prison to seize Balder, but he was already gone. Calancho and his men panicked, realizing their bargaining chip had slipped away. Standing before his followers, Calancho declared the fight was not finished. They had to choose between continued resistance or returning to oppression. Juan urged him to surrender to save lives. To Juan's surprise, Calancho admitted he had always known Juan was not a prisoner but a lawyer investigating corruption. He explained that he allowed Juan to move freely so the truth could come out. He also revealed that during the blackout he had deliberately left a path open for the medical team. In his view, keeping Balder under Montes would have meant delivering him back to the cartel. Ensuring Balder's data reached the United States was the only way to expose corrupt officials. Calancho then handed Juan a knife, asking him to end his life. He said dying by Juan's hand would shield his men from cartel retaliation. If he lived, his presence would only bring more danger to those around him. With fighting closing in and explosions nearing, Juan fulfilled the request. Calancho died, mourned by his men, who then named Juan the new leader of the North Bloc. Soon after, L-25 entered the prison and found Calancho dead, with Balder already in DEA custody. The truth emerged. Calancho had once been a trusted member of L-25's faction, promised power but betrayed and imprisoned. From there, he built the North Bloc into a rival force and a symbol of resistance. L-25 was also exposed, revealed to be only an enforcer for a far larger organization led by an unseen old man who commanded from the shadows. Weeks later, Balder's suitcase was made public. The files detailed bribes and transactions involving high-ranking Mexican officials, members of the National Guard, and prison leaders. U.S. agents were implicated as well, including officers who had sworn to fight the cartels. The only field agent cleared was Javi. Montez's name was absent from the documents, leaving her untouched. Her popularity grew, with many urging her to run for president. Inside the prison, little changed immediately. The North Bloc passed into Juan's hands. With his wife and unborn child gone, he chose to remain. His story closed where it had begun, behind the walls of Ciudad Juarez. So the moral of the story is, if you ever find yourself in a dangerous prison riot, just remember that disguises, chickens, and skewered meat can apparently solve anything.